and welcome back to the Healthtech Vision podcast, brought to you by SomX, where we break down the healthtech news every single week so you don't have to. This week, I am joined by producer Adama, keeping us in line and making sure we behave, as she does every single week, my colleague, co-founder James, and also a very, very special guest from none other than Flo, Anna. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, Jessica. Hi, Adam and James. I'm great. I'm very excited. This is my first podcast. And I was very nervous about what we'll be talking about, like how I will look like. So hopefully it's going to be a good fun for all of us.
We will do our best to take care of you, but you're going to do a great job. And we have so many exciting things to talk about. So have no fear. You're in safe hands. James, what have you been up to this week?
Right, what have I been up to this week? Was at Google yesterday. We had an event. I say we had an event. I just went to an event. What a delight that was, not having to speak at it or organise it or do anything. I actually just went as a guest to an event at Google about generative AI. That was fun. Did an awesome podcast yesterday. Recorded it, so it's not live yet. But someone called Charlie Wells from Hello Self, who built and sold a marketing agency, then had a brain hemorrhage that meant he was in a coma for a long time, very, very nearly died. Had like what sounds like an horrendous like spiral split of one of his arteries in his brain. Had all this life-saving surgery and has since started a health tech company. I won't go into more detail than that for spoilers, but that was an incredibly powerful episode that I ended up cancelling like 4 meetings afterwards to keep talking to guys. So that's like a 2-hour-long podcast for anyone that's got the stamina to listen to that. But it is interesting when it comes out, so look out for that in 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, fun week so far.
Awesome. Anna, how's your week been? I've seen you've been talking about your new office. You've been talking about breastfeeding in the office, pumping in the office. Is that just the norm for you in the Flow office these days?
It was busy. I think it was a busy month. I don't know if you've heard we raised a round. So now
I don't know. Has anyone heard that? Has anyone heard Flow raised some money? Just a little bit of money?
Most people have heard that you raised a round.
Yeah, it wasn't as big, no main screens on main squares of every city. But anyways, we raised a new round. And it was like a really busy summer and really busy months. And this week we opened a new office. So we had an office near Tower Bridge. And now we take like a whole floor in the same building. Really nice design. Very breastfeeding friendly, children friendly, pets friendly. So I was there yesterday and I really loved it. The food is great, so come to see us.
Oh, if the food is good, count me in. That's all I need. Good food. That sounds awesome. Nice. Well, you know what? Since you brought it up, let's talk about the raise. And I think that brings us on really nicely to our first story, which is about Femtech startups are on track for record VC funding, helped a little bit by the phenomenal raise that Flow have just achieved and the valuation that has just been announced. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what's been going on, how long it's taken to raise such a significant sum of money and reach that milestone. And then I'm going to ask you some questions, interrogate you about how you're going to spend that money.
That's the most tricky question. So I think we started thinking about the raise last year. We are a profitable company. So this investment was more for future growth rather than, like current situation. And it was, as I said, it was a busy summer. We had several bidders. We ended up signing a deal with General Atlantic. So we got 200 million and the valuation is 1 billion. I think it was the best choice for us. I mean, this investor has unique expertise in technology investments, in subscription business investment. So they're investor of Duolingo, Chess.com. So the kind of businesses that we look at when we think about where we want to go in terms of business metrics. So it was a really good deal for us. We are super happy. And now look at the financial markets. So you see that like the markets are going a bit down. Maybe the recession is starting. So it was a good time for us to get the money. And now we plan to invest them into growth in new regions, expanding our product into new user segments like perimenopause and menopause. We want to do more localization, maybe grow our user base in Mexico, Brazil, do better personalization, novel technologies. So like we have a really long roadmap, like a really big roadmap. So this year is going to be very exciting, and please follow updates from Flo because it might be interesting for male partners even more.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's no surprise to anyone who listens to this podcast. I rave about Flow all the time and my experience of using it. And James has recently started becoming a partner user of Flow because we are expecting. And so we have been tracking our baby progress with the app. And it's been really nice to both have the different sides of it so that there's something that's tailored to him and tailored to me. And some of the conversations we've had about the experiences that it feels like you're having separate experiences, and something like that can really help unite you. And there's not a lot out there for men. And so I think that actually bringing men more into the women's experience of health, so it's a family experience rather than just the woman dealing with her period pain every month or like, you know, how many weeks along she is in a pregnancy, I think is a really powerful thing. And I think it's incredibly valuable that, you know, you're creating a platform and an opportunity where you can kind of bring that together rather than keeping it siloed, which it traditionally has been.
You know, Jessica, while you were talking about partner mode and James taking active part in tracking the baby's growth, I remember a story we tried. The idea was partner mode maybe like 6 years ago, and men were not willing to use the partner mode. There was no absolute, like, there was very minimal interest in, you know, reading about your partner's health, what is she experiencing, and, you know, like, we had to close the project because like there was no subscriptions, there was very low engagement. And now 6 years later we see that it became viral with very small investment into marketing. We had like significant number of installs from male partners. So I think we're observing a behavioral change, a societal change, that men are more willing to learn about their partner, their health, family, and so on. So I'm super happy.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it is the next frontier for women's health, isn't it? Because just because it's women's health doesn't mean that only women should know about it. That's not how we improve as a society. That's not how we get the benefits of the understanding of women's health. We get those benefits when everybody understands it. And I think what I've learned from having that partner out, and this isn't an ad for Flow, by the way, like Anna's not paid to be on here, like we are just talking about our genuine experience. I think since having that app, it has definitely, you talked about united experience there, Jessica, like that's what it's felt like. The app sort of really sort of makes you do that because it tells me this, it says it in the way it expresses through language, like this is what Jessica is likely to be feeling. These are the types of things you can offer to do to help. By the way, here's a few conversation starters that will be useful for the two of you at this point in the pregnancy. Like whilst it's an app, it's encouraging you to speak to each other as human beings, you know, like that's an interesting thing. So whilst it's a digital health I don't know, solution. I hate the word solution, but like it's a digital health thing, isn't it? But it's a behavioral nudge. It's a behavioral nudge to encourage you to have an experience in the real world. And I think that's really interesting. What I think will be fun to see is I don't actually know what happens when the pregnancy ends to my partner app. I wonder if that now stays on my phone and then tells me other things about like, just, I don't know, whether the direction of travel here is for you to keep men informed as to the cycle and to keep men informed as to women's health more broadly, like from now on. I think that then becomes a really interesting component, because now it's on my phone. Like I'm not going to actively delete the thing. It's just there, as well as the other 100,000 apps that are on there that I've forgotten about. Like, it's a great opportunity to then like send through educational material that's going to benefit society at large by informing men about women's health. I think that is an incredible opportunity when you consider the amount of users, as you say, that you've now got. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
I would love to hear your ideas. So when you come to Flow Office, we can sit together and
I think
we're gonna do a user interview.
I do have ideas. Yeah.
Shot, Jesus got ideas.
Do have them.
Okay, deal.
Oh, I think as well, it sounds like you've made some significant headway in actually just capturing the attention of men, and clearly behavior change and the cultural zeitgeist has shifted to allow for that. But now that you kind of have that captive attention, I can't remember exactly what the stats are, and there'll be other people who will know it off the top of their head. But, if we take fertility, for example, and fertility isn't the only part of a women's health journey, but, the cause of fertility for lots of people is unexplained. Often it's assumed that it's a woman, but actually that there are factors that affect men as well. And I wonder whether there's an opportunity for, solutions like Flow and others who are doing similar things or slightly different things but where you've kind of got the attention of the men now to be able to tap into their experience of those things too. So that, again, like it's not just a single experience of one person, it's about a collective experience of a family or even just a person, I guess. But yeah, I think that would be cool to see, because I don't think that there's a lot that I've certainly seen from my perspective that taps into that shared experience from the men's perspective as well as the women's perspective.
I just have a question of what does the raise mean for you as, chief medical officer, like your department, your team? What is this, you mentioned that it's growth capital, right? Like you're already profitable. This is going to go to future growth. Does that mean just of users? Does that mean of your team? I'm just interested in your experience of this now.
I think for me, it's like new raise. I've seen maybe 2 or 3 raises. I've been with Flow for 7 years. So every raise is more work, because when you get more money, so investors expect the bar to be higher, like more users, more features, more revenue growth. And this is what is actually keeping me within Flow for years, because I used to change jobs maybe 2 or 3 years. Like every time I would change a job in the industry, I started in intensive care medicine and I got bored. Imagine, like acute trauma, blood everywhere, people screaming, shouting, and I got bored.
Incredibly dull.
Yeah, it's like, because it's repetitive. And here, because this is a startup culture, you get a new raise, new investors come and tell you, okay, the bar is higher, higher, higher. So it's very motivating. So I guess besides like growing our user base, we would definitely invest more into more like sophisticated features for male, for female, menopause, better personalization. So more work. And I love novelty. I love challenge. So I'm like very, very excited.
Nice. And so talking more about the raise, I think it's really interesting, the decision to take that capital from General Atlantic, and you referenced a few of their other investments like Duolingo, for example. And I'm curious to understand like a little bit of their point of view, where, were they actively looking for a femtech investment, or were they looking at something else? Like, what was their criteria, and what do you think it was that attracted them to Flow? Because we hear this narrative, which is true to a large extent, that women's health solutions and femtech struggles to attract investment for lots of different reasons. And I find it super interesting that we have this fund that has a broad portfolio here. And Flow is a women's health solution. So what do you think it was that kind of really reeled them in?
It's always hard to say I can't get inside their brains. It's always hard to comment on someone else's action. It's like saying why my husband did this or that. I think I know, but probably
which will forever remain an enigma.
Yeah, maybe I can answer only on behalf of my husband, but probably no, it wouldn't be true. But my personal opinion, what made Flow attractive to investors, I think it's not the fact that Femtech became a big hype like AI, Gen AI. No, probably in Gen AI, investors are ready to buy anything or invest in anything with Gen AI label. With Femtech, no. I think as I said, they're really good in investing in subscription businesses, digital businesses. So I guess they looked at our audience size. So we have 70 million monthly active users. There's 1 in 6 women in the US is using Flow. So we have a huge database. Then we have very good year-to-year growth, around 50%. So it's really good. And we have a really healthy ratio of customer acquisition cost to LTV. So again, it means that we can grow even more, given a good investment. We can double or triple our audience size, and then our conversion to subscription, because we're a business that earns money by selling subscriptions to our app. So we are not doing any paid advertisement within the app. We're not selling any physical goods yet. So subscription conversion ratio is really good. We have 5 million paying users. And there is a good dynamics. If you would look in our graphs, Sensor Tower and other analytical systems, you would see that our metrics are growing. So that's what investors expect of any B2C company in any category, health and fitness or games or name ad tech, fintech, so name it a few. So I don't think it was because we are Femtech. I think it was because we've been successful in our market, and our market turned out to be Femtech. But overall, this brings me to the article that we wanted to discuss about investment in Femtech and the fact that this area that was a bit ignored, overseen, is becoming more popular. It's becoming a topic of hot discussions, but we've seen several companies raising successfully. I think it started with Maven. We've seen also other companies raising in Femtech, Billion to One, Bellabit. So we are not the first and hopefully not the last. And I would love to see more companies getting investment, because I love competition. Competition is motivating. It's very inspirational. That's the fuel of progress, competition. So I really hope our investment would be motivational for other startup founders to double down on, their efforts in growth. The future of Femtech is positive.
That's good. That's what we want to hear. And I think there's so much going on these days in Femtech as well. And maybe it's because it's a space that I exist in. but it feels noisy, and I mean that in a positive way. Like it's encouraging to see how many people are motivated to bring solutions to the market. And I guess, like, you know, that there is this challenge that it seems to be, as you said before we started recording, at the early stages, and, you know, maybe through further stages too, but at those early stages, trying to break through those barriers for funding, where actually you don't have the data and you haven't got the revenue and market traction yet, but you see an opportunity and you know that there's a problem to solve. So I wonder, from like your experience with Flow, like, you know, what you think, how you think that maybe could be addressed, and, you know, whether it's something that VCs need to do and be more proactive in. And it sounds like, from, you know, this article that we're seeing from PitchBook, that they're starting to take more notice. But how do you think we attract that capital at all levels across the space?
Again, I'm not from a VC, so it's hard to say, to put myself in their shoes. But like, from Flow experience, we really, like, we started with zero, and it wasn't like we weren't the first in the market. But I think our success was that we were trying to focus. So we took one segment, one market, like track audience, most, like, we started with English speaking, and we tried to build the best product we can to attract as many free users as possible. So we tried to focus because we didn't have enough money. And then, as soon as we got enough users, we tried to start early monetization to get more money that we could reinvest in user acquisition and further growth. So my advice to smaller companies would be, pick one problem, one user segment, spend your $3 only on this problem, on this user segment, if you're confident in your idea, to show at least some success. And then investors would see, okay, you picked this problem, you solved this problem. There is, like, the metrics are growing. Maybe they're growing from 5 users to 15 users, but at least you have positive dynamics. You have a proof that this is the idea that works and you're able to solve this problem. And then, of course, it depends on the market situation, because if it's a recession, it doesn't matter how well you solve the problem. I don't know, probably investors wouldn't want to invest. But recession is not forever. Like, there might be better times, and then you might get the funding. But that's the problem of smaller companies, that they try to solve too many problems at the same time. They try to hire too many people. They spend resources not wisely. So you have to be greedy. You have to be very, like, use every dollar only for your best bet.
And I can imagine. I mean, I feel this myself often. It's really easy to get distracted, isn't it? Because there's so many, especially in the tech world, there's so many things happening, and it's happening at such pace, and it can be really hard to have that focus when you feel like there are things that you need to be perhaps keeping up with, or you know, a new way of doing things that might improve your product market fit, or, you know, a new segment that you should go after. So I think, you know, it's an interesting time because there's lots of opportunity, but with that opportunity, I guess it also requires additional, like, extra focus and extra energy towards that, to not get distracted from you know, your kind of direction of travel. That's
the job of a CEO. And I think, like, our CEO Dmitry, he is really good in killing ideas and pushing us to focus, because people always come, I have an idea, this is an idea, and he would say, no, remember, focus, we are not doing this. And people hated him. I mean, with an organization, and we even had a joke that, please put your idea in the bin of the ideas. Just because, like, if you don't have unlimited resources, like, you have to pick. Like, it's the same with life. Sometimes you just have to pick which shoes to put on. You can't put 5 pairs at a time.
Yeah. No, that is so right. Well, from one big raise to another, our second story is brought to us by Fierce Healthcare, and it is another raise story, this time about mental health. So Spring Health has hit a huge valuation of $3.3 billion with a $100 million Series E round. Now, I'd forgotten that Series E rounds even existed. Haven't heard about one of those for ages, but the reason I phrase it, funnily enough, is I guess mental health is also a taboo space, and maybe has been on a similar journey to women's health, and is perhaps a bit further ahead. And I wonder if there's anything here that we can kind of take heed in, where it seems to me like there's still a long way to go in mental health too, but actually we are seeing the maturation of some mental digital health solutions really gaining traction and raising these big valuations and sums of money. What do you think on that, Anna?
Well, when I was reading this article, I paid attention to the fact that they sell their product as a part of employee benefits. And at Flow, we explored this channel, and we were talking to employee benefits providers, big companies in the US. And I remember those conversations that they said that mental health digital solutions became popular during COVID, when everyone experienced mental health issues, and then it was then that they proved that they are effective, that they increase productivity, they have positive outcomes. And you see in this paper that the company, actually, what is good about them, that they did a study to measure the health outcomes. And that's what employee benefit providers want. They want an evidence that what you do increases productivity or decreases absenteeism. And I think this market will be growing because it's a big issue in developing countries and in developed countries with mental health at the workplace. And you've seen that they had really impressive results where they decreased, they decreased costs for mental health care for people who are using those digital solutions. And when we were exploring the employee benefits as a probably alternative monetization opportunity for Flow, we did our own randomized controlled trial where we had given Flow to women working for corporate jobs in the US. And we've seen that using Flow as educational platform increased knowledge about PMS and PMDD, and they would take less days off. So the absenteeism decreased. So reading the paper from Spring Health and knowing our own data from our own RCT, I'm a big believer of digital health solutions improving productivity at the workplace. And I'm thinking now, what else can be there to help employers get their staff working better? And I don't know, is there any specific problem for males? And maybe question to you, James, what would make you more productive at work? Is there any health issues?
It's a great question. And actually, before I address that part, just to comment on what you said before as well, I think obviously the work is becoming more productive, and therefore the employer's paying for that is one thing. I almost like to think of that as a responsibility of the employer as well, which I think is great, because especially where it comes to mental health, which it is here, and it's almost like there's a model where I mean, I don't know how PC this is, but if you're going to be employed by a massive organization, then perhaps you do need something that you can go to that will help you with mindfulness and meditation and care navigation and coaching and therapy and medication management. Like, I guess my point is that they're not just aiming this at the mentally unwell. Clearly, through the mindfulness and meditation, there's an element there of propping up mental health in the normal range as well, which I think increases that kind of, in inverted commas, market
even
size.
Supporting mental health for those who don't have yet issues, like a healthy diet. You do it even if you're healthy. That's
Absolutely.
The point.
And I think that's really interesting, because if as part of your employment you then get tools to work on your mental fitness, I think it's an interesting move that sort of normalizes, well, we go to the gym every, day, week, whatever, for our physical health. Then there's things here that are normalizing the notion of working on your mental fitness as much as your physical fitness. So I think that's nice. I think that's interesting. And I think it is the responsibility of the employer potentially that they would do that. And I think, there's a positive business model behind it. So I think that's great. In terms of, flow being part of a package for women's health, what would be the men's equivalent? The truth is, I don't know, but I think there are certain points at which the stress and anxiety of health can certainly exacerbate for men. I think one thing that we've discussed on this podcast before is the fertility journey. I think for some men, conversation I had literally last night at the Google event, someone that is currently a man that is trying to get pregnant with his partner and is feeling quite stressed at all of the different things, and speaking to andrology specialists and all this sort of stuff, and, an incredibly stressful part of life, for him. And there's a part there where the employer could support there with certain elements that would help with their fertility journey. So I think that's an important part of life for men that could definitely have that. On an ongoing basis, I don't know. I think men struggle to talk about this stuff at the best of times, let alone me on a podcast here trying to lay it all out for you. But no, I think there's plenty of men for whom, if a service were available that they could access privately, that would prop up their mental fitness, or indeed help them when they're feeling mentally unwell. I think if it was there for them, that they didn't have to go through the barrier of seeking it, and they didn't have to go through the barrier of, all the barriers that exist between knowing you need help and actually getting it, the crisis of identity and masculinity and all those things, like, much easier when it's just a service that you're encouraged to access through your employer potentially, than one that you would then have to go and seek and, confront that identity issue and all the rest of it. So I don't want to speak for all men though. Like, I really am not qualified to do so. We're all weird and wonderful in our own individual ways. And so I can only speak to my experience, but if something were to exist that was easy to access, it would certainly help me in those times.
I think you recently spoke to Neil from Metal, didn't you? Which is...
Yes.
Exactly that, but it's a more B2C model than it is an employer model. And Junaid as well from Man Confidence. I think, it sounds like there is some momentum that is gathering, and a recognition that is something that does need to be put in place, that is missing and that is overlooked. And hopefully we see those kinds of solutions and platforms go on to thrive and learn from, the experiences of the likes of Flow or Spring Health, who have kind of paved the way for other innovators and technologies to kind of go forth and flourish. And of course, no journey is exactly the same, but there's a lot that I think people can learn from, looking to how other people have tackled things from not necessarily even the same space, which hopefully means that we see more of this stuff have the impact that we know that it needs to. Our final story of the day is about a clinical research study. You know that we love to get into these, interrogate them, and make sure that they're telling us the full story. But the actual story itself comes to us from the BBC, and it is about an AI assistant which is easing NHS pressure in cataract care. Now, I had a look at this one, and essentially how this AI assistant has been used is through phone consultations. And this is something that I have not heard an AI assistant being used for before. I've heard of the chatbots. I've heard of the, obviously how we all use generative AI, but through an actual audio and phone consultation was completely new to me. But basically, patients who had undergone cataract surgery received a phone call and consultation from the AI assistant to gather information and assess how well they were recovering, to then make a decision about whether or not they might need further medical assessment. Now, this study seems pretty robust. It was published in The Lancet and had a cohort of 225 patients. And what it proved was that there was a 94% sensitivity and 86% specificity of the results from the AI assistant versus the clinician. And there was moderate to strong agreement with clinicians across all parameters. One of the things that stood out to me, though, was that they also ran interviews with 20 of the patients who had participated. And whilst generally they were positive about that experience, they did raise concerns, or the theme came out around concerns about the lack of human element. Now, there was also a cost analysis done to look at what the efficiencies were, and it showed that those staff cost benefits were £35 per patient, which is, not insignificant when you consider that I think it's 500,000 people have cataract surgery every year in the UK. But James, I want to come to you first, because this has been an ongoing conversation that we have had on this podcast around the role of AI and whether or not it should be replacing or not human interactions in the health experience. I can see you preparing yourself now to really come forth.
Yeah, rolling my sleeves up here, ready to unleash onto this story.
So this technology has been used in hospitals in the UK, and apparently in the last year alone, it has made more than 12,000 calls to patients, each lasting on average around 8 minutes. That's a huge number of minutes and time that this AI has spent gathering data, and obviously that data can be fed into the algorithm, it can learn, it can improve. But the interesting thing was that it cites that the amount of time that has taken would be the equivalent to having two full-time nurses spending all day making these calls and doing nothing else. So that's not including administration or anything like that. That is a huge amount of time. And when we think about, workforce pressures and waiting lists and all of that kind of thing, where you're saving, in the region of, I think it says 530 hours of nursing time, that's not insignificant. So I guess my question is, what role do these kinds of technologies have to play in alleviating those pressures, but also should they?
So let me start by just clearing this up here. So what we're saying is, after someone has surgery, they are called by an AI. The phone rings when they answer the phone, it's an AI that I'm assuming sounds a little bit robotic, because they're not going to fake the fact it's a human. So it's going to be quite clear it's an AI, or it might introduce itself as an AI. It's then going to ask if they're okay and if they have any complications post-surgery. The person is then going to say either they're fine or they're not, and then something's going to happen down the line. So firstly, I get it. I understand. Like, you're looking for efficiencies. You're a management consultant. You're, I don't know, McKinsey. You've been asked by this trust to come and find some efficiencies, and you've gone, well, there's 35 quid that we can save every single time this happens. But you're right. The question is, should we? And I actually think in this case, by the way, I think this is sort of fine. I think I think it's fine. I think, you know, if my dad's just had cataract surgery, it's just cataract surgery. It's an awake surgery. Like, you're just asking a few basic questions. Probably, you know, how does your eye feel? Can you see properly? Any blurred vision? Blah, blah, blah. The one thing that I worry about with this, though, is what this then enables. Because I've used this phrase before, but if we become okay with, let's just go one stage up on the definition here. If we become okay with an AI calling a patient after surgery to ask them about complications, that is a new baseline that we do not come back from, because 35 quid per patient is not insignificant. So what I worry about is the slippery slope here of, is that worth 35 quid? To that individual patient, it probably is worth 35 quid to be spoken to by a human, potentially. Maybe it's not. Maybe there are some people that think, oh yeah, speaking to the robot's fine. But I think if you're going to speak to most people and give them an opportunity to disclose something to a human or a robot, I think most are going to want to do that with a human. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is an assumption, but you're absolutely right. If you look at the Lancet study here, patients were concerned about the lack of a human element in cases with complications. And that's the thing. You're now going to have to report complications to a robot. Now, the unit economics of this, wonderful. Yeah, great. But I think I struggle because of the philosophical point about what healthcare actually is. And why do we want to save money in healthcare? Well, we want to save money in areas of healthcare so that we can redeploy that resource to where it matters. And yeah, okay, to make healthcare sustainable, that's the first thing. We want to make healthcare sustainable so it can be publicly funded, and, you know, the 105 billion, you know, from that goes into NHS England and all the rest of it from Department of Health, and we want that to cover everything. And so we do want to make savings where we can, but we do need to have a line, I think, as to where we're comfortable with where AI goes. And the point I've made previously of like putting AI at the point of human suffering alone, I think is very dangerous. And where you've got someone that has been sat there waiting for this phone call, really concerned because actually their vision is a lot more blurred than they were told it would be at this point, and only in one eye. Oh, they probably only had the surgery in one eye because they probably wouldn't do both at the same time. But you see my point? Like someone's now really anxious, and was that worth the 35 quid saving there? Like, I don't know that it was. And this is where I'm struggling. As I say, I think actually in this case, if we're going to isolate it here to cataract surgery and all the rest of it, I think it's on balance probably fine. But again, that phrase on balance, like, what about the people that didn't feel fine? That was the saving across the whole project worth the patients not feeling fine because they were the ones that had complications? So that plus what does this enable for the future in terms of other people that look at this and go, okay, where else can a robot speak to someone that's straight after surgery? What about appendix? Can we just stick a phone call in like 2 weeks after appendix? Like, I don't know, like whatever it is. So I just worry about that, and I worry when we're talking about, you know, the monetary terms. 35 quid per patient, that's 500,000 a year. So you're talking 15-20 million saving a year across the country for a human to human interaction that's now disappeared for someone that might have complications across the country doesn't seem to stack up for me. The 20 million quid for every single person across the country for cataract surgery getting I don't know how I feel. I'm devil's advocate in a way, just exploring that, but I get that for the people that don't have complications, it's fine. I get that for the people with complications, they're concerned about a lack of human element. That's me quoting directly. And I also get that the NHS needs to save money in order to redeploy it in areas that it's needed, and this might be a place that does it relatively safely. In fact, might do it safely. It just might not do it so that people have the best human experience of their healthcare. But perhaps these are the types of things that we need to do in order to make healthcare more sustainable across the entire system. So there's me kind of displaying a few sides and somewhat on the fence.
Can I add to what you've said? I'll be like probably a person with an opposite opinion. So I understand people who want human interactions, who want a kind nurse to call them and walk them through possible complications.
I was going to say it doesn't need to be a nurse, by the way, for that unit economics. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Someone kind to talk about the complications. Yeah. So you're comparing AI versus a human calling. But I would compare AI calling versus no one is calling, and you're doing Googling. And you're a vulnerable, maybe a vulnerable part of population who is not tech savvy. You're old, you're young, you're, financially, you can't afford having an internet. So, and I would say that for me, AI better than nothing. And I have my own personal story. So I had a C-section here in UK last October. I had it privately. And then I was discharged and I was home and no one called. No one called. No one came. And I was thinking, okay, I'm a doctor. I probably know what are the possible complications. I was measuring my temperature. I was looking at my discharge. But what if I wasn't a doctor? What if I was a usual woman without a medical degree who doesn't know that heavy flow is a sign of a complication, a temperature, and so on, who is too busy taking care of her baby, maybe she has more children, a husband, and no one calls, neither a person nor AI, and she's just too busy solving other problems when she's actually bleeding. So I would say that AI definitely may help to do the work that is not done, to triage people who have complications or don't have complications, to explain what are possible complications. And if you have heavy bleeding, low blood pressure, please call this number. So I feel that we shouldn't be too much worried about AI and how people feel about it, because I don't think we are doing a good job helping people.
I think you're right. I think that's a very, very, very good argument. I think the argument about, but it's not happening at all, so an AI is better than nothing, I think is a great argument. I really do. And I don't really have much more to say than that, other than...
Yeah, AI calling to talk about particular complications is better than you Googling and, trying to understand what are the possible complications.
Yeah, I get it. And I guess my only comeback though is that I will just reiterate that whatever we do put in with AI that moves something from a human interaction to a machine interaction is a new baseline, and we have to become okay that everything now, all of those interactions now resort to that, because we as a healthcare system have become okay that that is now it's okay to now ring someone after surgery with an AI. So now everyone in the country is now going to saddle back onto that to save money, which is fine. If we think that, if we think that is appropriate. And so that's the I think the tension, which is, again, we're doing this in cataracts, we could just do this across everything. And your argument would be, well, they're not getting any phone call right now. Some of them are not getting any phone call, which is why this is a good thing. I would then say, for everyone that is currently getting called by a human, they're now going to have that replaced by an AI, and that's what everyone's going to get. Now, again, we might all agree that that's reasonable. I think we lose something in healthcare by doing that, is all I'm saying. It still might be reasonable. I still think we're losing something.
I think to Anna's point, like, you can't lose something that isn't there already. And I think it's a leap to suggest that we would go from cataract surgery to even like a cesarean or appendicitis or something like that. I would imagine, this is an NIHR funded study. It's done in multiple NHS hospitals, that it's been risk assessed, and cataracts has been chosen for a very particular reason, because the risk level is low. And so actually that there are thresholds through which technology won't be able to progress. I don't think that this is necessarily a gateway. I think that this presents a threshold where, broadly speaking, the risk to the patient is low. And I would argue that people might prefer to hear from a person, but maybe the study should have measured, satisfaction in a more quantitative way. But what is the actual benefit to the health outcome from there? So we see that there's a cost saving, and there's the cost implication to including the person. But is there actually a benefit to their health outcome? And I think in situations where the risk is low and it's high volume, I'm sure everyone would rather speak to a person. But to Anna's point, I guess there aren't lots of people. And actually, if those people can be deployed to somewhere else where there is a gap and fill that need, I think it's a good thing. And we have to find solutions somewhere, and there has to be compromise somewhere, but that has to be done on an ethical and moral basis. And I think that these technologies have to be deployed on an ethical and moral basis, and we have to understand what those thresholds are, rather than using studies like this as a gateway to say that it's acceptable to bring an AI assistant in to call people who have had all kinds of surgery.
I have another example about technologies. I think I'm a bit on a progressive side, and James is more on a conservative side in terms of AI. I remember, James, you also you worked in intensive care when you started your career. So I don't know how old you are, but there were times when in intensive care they would measure blood pressure with the manual blood pressure machine. So the nurse would take this pump, would come to a patient, and she would measure it. And I remember older doctors saying that, because there is one nurse per 6 patients, per 10 patients. So they would have sepsis patients with blood pressure measured 2 times a day, 3 times a day. And yes, that was human interaction. Possibly this nurse was very kind, holding a hand, maybe giving some good words. And she wasn't making mistakes because she could see if she did correct measurement or no. But, technology allowed us to measure blood pressure every minute, every 30 seconds if we need it. We have now in arterial, continuous blood pressure monitoring through the arteries. So, but anyways, as Jessica said, I think we just need to measure the risks before implementing technology. But I would try. I would try as many technologies as possible and see how we can improve the current healthcare, which is not making us happy. I think that's where we all agree, James.
And this is great because I agree. I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. My point would be we haven't actually measured what we lost moving it to from a human to an AI. We haven't actually measured what we lost. There is nothing it's difficult to measure that. We're just sort of assuming that it's fine. We're assuming that it's ethical. That's just been taken for granted. It's ethical. Yeah, it's fine. I imagine an ethical study was maybe done. I don't know, but who knows? But I don't know what we lost there. And that's sort of my point, is that if we're not quantifying what we lost moving from a human communication to an AI communication, we've just become okay that that's a thing. Where else might we become okay with a human communication moving to an AI communication? And at what point does that become a real loss when we know that human to human empathy is better for history taking, it's better for clinical outcomes, it's better for so many things, and that's academic and that's evidence. So if we know that it's better in these domains, if we know that, for example, human empathy leads to better history taking, this is an example of part of a history, asking about complications. And so I don't know what we've lost moving it from human to AI. And until we start measuring that, to your point, I think it's naive to think that this wouldn't be a gateway to more of the same. I take your point that right now it would just be for cataracts, but with such a large saving, of course there'll be pressure to move it to the next thing, would be my opinion. So I'm agreeing with you in so many ways, by the way, that I actually think that this is fine broadly. I just worry that there are certain things that we haven't measured. We haven't said, like, we're okay with moving it for these reasons and not these. And that's all I'm calling for in this whole AI conversation in healthcare, especially where it pertains to human-to-human interaction, is clarity on direction. I don't know where the boundaries are, which you are saying exist, Jessica. Like, you're saying, like, oh, you know, there must be a boundary here because beyond there it isn't safe. Well, where's that written down or declared? What organization is saying that that's the boundary? Where have we said the boundary is with AI communicating or humans communicating with AI rather than other humans? All I'm calling for is that boundary. I want to know what we're aiming for with healthcare, because my argument would always still be save money in other places so that we can redeploy humans to actually care for each other.
Mm. And I agree that boundary isn't there yet, but I think we more clearly, like, someone needs to take responsibility for that, and no one has done it yet, and I don't think the NHS understands it well enough to be able to do that. But we need more research like this, and that research needs to be even more detailed, and it does need to cover those elements. But I do think that we need to be pragmatic about where we make compromises. And what I'm saying is that where it's low risk, if that's been categorized as low risk, maybe that's where we need to make a compromise. But, you know, we'd all love to have a health service that functions optimally. And I think that we can definitely hope for that, and hope that technology brings us to that. But I guess we have immediate problems to solve as well, and we have to be able to mitigate for the risk and do it in a safe way without opening the floodgates. But we have to also be able to make compromises.
I think most people know that I'm so bullish on technology that, like, of course I'm going to advocate for AI in most places. I just think we should be careful.
We have to make this podcast
for the debate. Exactly. For the debate, I'm actually just going to defend that line.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting.
For the market.
Yeah. Well, on that fiery note, that excellent debate, I think we can leave it there for this week. It's been an excellent discussion, and I'm very grateful I can speak on behalf of us all, and I'm very grateful to having you join us this week. It has been excellent to get behind the scenes of the raise. Congratulations again, and rest assured, I speak for myself, I'm sure the rest of the team will follow. We'll definitely be down at the Flow offices sampling the food and ideating together, and sharing some thoughts on the direction of travel for women's health and men's health and family health and all of those things that we're really excited about at the moment. So thank you so much for joining us. If anyone wants to read the stories, obviously check out Healthtech Pigeon, the newsletter. All the links are in the usual places. And if you want to get in touch with Anna, you can find her on LinkedIn as well. So until next week and the next debate, have a good weekend.